I built my parents a $300,000 Lakeside Cottage for their 40th anniversary, and something strange happened after. For 3 years, I said nothing. Not when my coworkers complained about rising property prices. Not when my sister joked too casually about what we'd all inherit someday. And definitely not when Craig started throwing around words like asset leverage and passive income at Sunday dinners, like he was pitching a room full of investors instead of passing mashed potatoes. I just listened. That's what people never realize about silence. It isn't empty. It's storage. Every comment, every assumption, every careless sentence. I kept them, filed them away the same way I handled contracts at work, organized, dated, and ready to be used if necessary. My name is Riley. I'm 32. And I work in contract administration, which means I don't trust anything that isn't written down. And I don't believe anything until I've read the fine print twice. That mindset built the cottage, not just the walls, or the dock stretching quietly into the lake, or the wide, open doorways designed so my parents would never have to struggle as they got older. No, it built the foundation beneath the foundation, the kind no one sees until they try to break it. The idea came to me 3 years ago, on a night that didn't feel important at the time. My parents were tired, not dramatically, not in a way that would make anyone panic, just worn down in the quiet way that creeps up after decades of responsibility. 40 years of marriage, 40 years of work, 40 years of putting everyone else first. They deserved somewhere that didn't ask anything from them, somewhere safe. So I started looking, not casually, not just browsing, systematically. Location first, quiet but not isolated, waterfront but not flood prone, accessible roads year-round, minimal neighboring properties, low noise pollution, then structure, single level, no stairs, reinforced supports, wide halls, slip-resistant flooring, handles where there should be handles even if no one noticed them, and locks, good ones, the kind that don't just keep people out but make them think twice about trying. But the house was the easy part. The real work started when I sat down at my laptop and opened a blank document titled Trust Structure Draft Private. I didn't want this to be a gift that could be touched, borrowed, repurposed, or worse claimed. I'd seen how things like that went. Family use turns into temporary stay. Temporary stay turns into investment opportunity. And suddenly something meaningful becomes a spreadsheet. No, not this time. So I built something better. An irrevocable trust. It wasn't just legal, it was deliberate. Ownership locked. Usage restricted. Commercial activity explicitly prohibited. Enforcement automatic. No loopholes. No gray areas. No misunderstandings. Every word had weight. Every sentence had a purpose. Because words matter. And I knew that if anything ever went wrong, it wouldn't be because someone didn't understand. It would be because they thought they could get away with pretending they didn't. I didn't tell my sister. That part was intentional. It wasn't that I didn't love her. I did. But she talked. Not maliciously. Not strategically. Just constantly. And information, once it leaves your mouth, doesn't come back the same. It changes hands, changes tone, changes meaning. And eventually, it lands somewhere it shouldn't. Like with Craig. Craig didn't talk. Craig calculated. He listened the way I did, but for very different reasons. Where I heard meaning, he heard opportunity. Where I saw boundaries, he saw margins. And where I was building something safe, he would only ever see something usable. So I kept it quiet. 3 years of payments, 3 years of inspections, 3 years of paperwork no one else even knew existed. I visited the property alone, walked the dock alone, stood in the empty living room and imagined my parents there laughing, resting, finally breathing without pressure sitting on their shoulders. Every time I left, I locked the door carefully, not just out of habit, out of principle. Because this wasn't just a house, it was protection. The final step came 6 weeks before their anniversary. I sat at my desk, reviewing the completed documents one last time. Every clause, every condition, every enforcement trigger. Perfect, untouchable. I signed, dated, filed, and just like that, it was done. 3 years of silence, condensed into ink and structure. All that was left was to give it to them. If things had gone the way I planned, that's where the story would have ended. A quiet reveal, a grateful smile, a peaceful future. But plans don't fail because of what you see coming. They fail because of what slips through. And mine slipped out in the simplest way possible. A casual phone call, a single sentence, and one person hearing exactly what they'd been waiting for. It wasn't supposed to come out like that. Not after 3 years of planning. Not after everything I had carefully kept contained, structured, protected. But secrets don't always break under pressure. Sometimes they just slip. It was a Tuesday. Nothing dramatic. No warning signs. Just one of those routine calls I made to check in on my parents, half habit, half obligation, and maybe a little bit of guilt for how much I'd been keeping from them. My mom sounded lighter than usual. Happier. I noticed it immediately. We've just been getting things ready, she said casually. You know, sorting through old boxes, deciding what we'll bring to the lake. My hand froze around my pen. The lake? I repeated. Silence. Not the comfortable kind. The kind that arrives too fast, too sharp. Oh, she said softly. I thought you told your sister already. There it was. That tiny, irreversible moment. A single assumption. A single mistake. And just like that, 3 years of silence cracked. I didn't react. Not outwardly. That's the thing about control, you don't lose it all at once. You feel it slipping, and you choose whether to grab it back or let it fall. I grabbed it. Yeah, I said evenly. We talked about it. Another pause. Relief this time. Oh good, she said quickly. I didn't want to ruin the surprise. Too late. But I didn't say that. We finished the call like nothing had happened. Like nothing had shifted. But everything had. The second I hung up, I didn't sit there processing emotions. I didn't panic. I didn't even get angry. I did what I always do. I verified. Laptop open. Internet up. Fingers steady. Search bar. Rental platforms. It wasn't a guess. It was instinct. Because I knew exactly how information moved in my family. My mom tells my sister. My sister mentions it casually. Craig listens. And Craig acts. I didn't even need to scroll far. There it was. Clean photos. Professional angles. The dock. The living room. The exact kitchen I had stood in just weeks ago. Adjusting cabinet. Handles to make sure my mom wouldn't struggle opening them someday. All of it. Packaged. Marketed. Sold. Premium lakeside getaway, fully managed investment property. I stared at the screen for a long moment, not blinking, not breathing properly, just taking it in. Then I saw the host name, Craig. Of course. I clicked the listing. Every detail was worse than the last. Perfect for weekend escapes and long-term stays. High-demand location with excellent return potential. Professionally handled for a seamless guest experience. I almost laughed. Professionally handled. He had never even stepped foot inside the property. And yet somehow, he had turned it into a business. The price was aggressive. Too aggressive. Which meant one thing: he wasn't testing the waters. He was confident. Confident enough to assume I wouldn't notice. My parents wouldn't understand. And even if they did, it wouldn't matter. That's when I felt it. Not anger. Not yet. Something colder. Something sharper. Recognition. Because this wasn't random. This wasn't a misunderstanding or a rushed decision. This was aligned, calculated, deliberate. Craig hadn't stumbled onto an opportunity. He had been waiting for one. And the moment my sister opened her mouth, he moved. I leaned back in my chair, still staring at the listing. There's a moment in situations like this where you decide what kind of person you're going to be. You can react, call, yell, demand explanations, or you can observe, let them keep talking, keep moving, keep exposing themselves. I chose the second because people like Craig, they don't stop at one mistake. They build on it. And the more they build, the easier it is to take everything down. I refreshed the page. Availability, open. Bookings, already pending. Photos, recently uploaded. Timestamp, 2 days ago. 2 days. That's all it took. 2 days between hearing about something that wasn't his and trying to profit from it. I closed the laptop slowly, carefully. Like the situation required precision, not force. Because this wasn't about stopping him. Not yet. This was about understanding exactly how far he'd gone. And more importantly, how far he thought he could go. I picked up my keys. There was no point calling ahead. No point warning anyone. If Craig was bold enough to list a property that didn't belong to him, then I wanted to see exactly what that boldness looked like in person. Unfiltered, unprepared, real. The drive felt longer than usual. Not because of traffic, but because my mind was quiet. Too quiet. Running through possibilities, outcomes, responses. Not emotional ones, strategic ones. Because by the time I got there, this wouldn't be a conversation. It would be a correction. And when I finally pulled into that gravel driveway, I didn't feel surprised. I didn't feel confused. I didn't even feel angry. Because right there, exactly where I expected him to be, Craig was already at the dock, phone in hand, counting. He didn't even try to hide it. That was the first thing I noticed. Not the fact that he was there. Not the fact that he had let himself onto property that wasn't his. No, what stood out was the confidence. The assumption. The way Craig walked slowly along the dock, phone held out in front of him, like he belonged there. 32, 33. I hadn't even turned off the engine yet. For a second, I just sat there, watching through the windshield, taking it in. Because moments like this matter. Not emotionally, structurally. This was evidence. Behavior, unprompted. Intent, unfiltered. I opened the car door. The sound cut clean through the quiet. Craig stopped mid-step, turned, and for just a fraction of a second, barely noticeable if you weren't looking for it, his face slipped. Surprise, then recognition, then adjustment. Riley, he called out, smiling like this was a coincidence. Hey, you made it. Made it. Like I was expected. Like this was normal. I shut the car door slowly, deliberately, and started walking toward him. "You're measuring," I said. No greeting, no warmth, just observation. Craig glanced at his phone, then back at me, already shifting into explanation mode. "Yeah, I mean it's just for accuracy," he said. "You'd be surprised how much listings benefit from precise dimensions." "The listing?" I asked. There it was again, that word. He didn't hesitate, didn't backtrack. If anything, he leaned into it. "Yeah," he said, nodding like we were on the same page. "It's already getting traction. A couple of inquiries came in this morning, actually. People love lakefront properties, especially ones that are this well." "Craig." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. But something in the way I said his name made him stop talking. "Get off the dock." Silence. Not confusion. Not misunderstanding. Just resistance. He let out a small laugh, like I had said something mildly unreasonable. "Relax," he said. "I'm just helping maximize the potential here. You built something amazing, why not let it work for you?" For you. That's how he framed it. Like this was a favor. I stepped onto the dock. The wood creaked softly under my weight. Craig didn't move, didn't step back. He just watched me, recalculating. Because now it was different. Now I was here. And whatever version of the situation he had constructed in his head, it didn't include this version of me. "You listed it," I said. Not a question. A statement. He shrugged. "Technically, yeah. But it's not a big deal. It's just a temporary thing until your parents actually start using it. No point letting it sit empty, right?" There it was. Justification. Casual. Pre-packaged. Like he'd already rehearsed this conversation in his head and decided it would go his way. "You used photos," I continued. "Of course," he said. "Good ones too." I had to tweak a few things. Adjust the lighting, presentation matters. "You've never been inside." That hit. Not hard, but enough to shift something. His smile tightened. "Well, I mean, your sister described it. And honestly, the layout is pretty standard for Craig." Again, his name. Flat. Precise. Final. "You've never been inside," I repeated. This time, he didn't answer. The wind moved lightly across the water, rippling the surface of the lake. Everything else felt still, suspended, like the moment was waiting to see what I'd do next. Craig broke first. "Look," he said, lowering his phone slightly, tone shifting into something more defensive. "I don't know why you're acting like this is a problem. We're family. This benefits everyone." Everyone. I almost smiled, because that word always means the same thing when people like him use it. "Me. Who gave you access?" I asked. Another simple question. Another moment he didn't expect. "I didn't need access," he said quickly. "The place wasn't locked when I got here." That was a lie. I knew it instantly. Not because I doubted him, but because I knew the locks. I chose them, installed them, tested them myself. He didn't get in because it was unlocked. He got in because he tried until something worked. And that told me everything I needed to know. I looked past him toward the cottage, the windows, the door, everything exactly as I had left it. Except now, it wasn't untouched. Not anymore. "Did you go inside?" I asked. Craig hesitated, just for a second. Then, "Yeah, but only to take pictures." Nothing was disturbed. I was careful. Careful. Like that made it better. Like that made it acceptable. I nodded slowly, not because I agreed, but because the picture was becoming clearer. Piece by piece. Action by action. This wasn't impulsive. It wasn't reckless. It was intentional. Calculated risk based on one assumption, that I wouldn't push back hard enough to matter. "Okay," I said finally. Craig blinked. "Okay," he repeated. "Okay," I said again. And for the first time since I arrived, he looked unsure, because that wasn't the reaction he expected. No anger, no argument, no escalation, just acceptance. Or at least, that's what it looked like. "Great," he said cautiously, trying to recover his footing. "Then we're on the same page. I can show you the listing if you want. Maybe we can tweak a few things together. Optimize pricing." "Come inside," I said. I turned and walked off the dock without waiting. Didn't check if he followed. Didn't need to. Because now we were done talking about what he thought this was, and about to start dealing with what it actually was. Behind me, I heard his footsteps hesitate, then follow. Confident again. Relieved even. Because in his mind, he had already won. He just didn't realize yet. The conversation hadn't even started. Craig walked in like he owned the place. That was the second mistake. The first was listing the property. The second was thinking this room was neutral ground. The air inside the cottage still carried that untouched feeling. Clean wood, quiet space, everything exactly where I had left it. Except now it wasn't untouched. Not anymore. Craig moved past me, glancing around like he was assessing inventory. "Yeah, this is even better in person," he said, nodding approvingly. "The photos didn't do it justice. Comma. We could probably raise the price. Sit down." I didn't look at him when I said it. I was already pulling out the chair at the kitchen table. He paused just for a second. Then he laughed lightly, like this was still casual. "Riley, You don't have to be so formal about this. Sit this time. I looked at him. And whatever he saw in my expression, it worked. He sat. I didn't rush. That was important. Control isn't just about what you say. It's about when you say it. I set my bag on the table, opened it, took out a thin folder. No dramatic gestures. No tension-filled sighs. Just process. Craig leaned back in his chair, watching me, still trying to read the situation, still thinking this was a conversation he could steer. This doesn't have to be a big deal, he said. We can just adjust things moving forward. No harm done. No harm. That phrase again. People love using it before they understand what harm actually looks like. I placed the first document on the table, then the second, then the third, then the fourth. Each one aligned perfectly with the edge of the wood, neat, intentional. Final, Craig glanced down. Unimpressed. Riley, he sighed. You don't need to go all contract mode on me. This is family. I folded my hands in front of me. I'm not in contract mode, I said calmly. This is just how I talk when I need to be understood. He smirked slightly, like that was amusing. Like this was still something he could brush off. He tapped the top document with 2 fingers. What is all this? Read, I said. He didn't. Instead, he leaned back again, crossing his arms. Or, he said, you could just explain it like a normal person. So I did. Document 1, I said, tapping it lightly, is the trust deed. No reaction. Document 2 is the property title. Still nothing. Document 3 outlines usage restrictions. A flicker, small, but there. Document 4, I finished, is enforcement. That one landed. Not fully, but enough. Craig leaned forward slightly. It's just a house. No, I said. It isn't. He exhaled. Irritation starting to creep in. Riley, listen. I get that you put effort into this, but you're acting like I did something criminal. I'm trying to help. This place could make serious money. I slid the 4th document closer to him. Page 3, I said, section 7. He didn't move, didn't touch it. So I reached forward, flipped it open, and turned it toward him. Then I read it out loud. Any unauthorized commercial use of the property constitutes breach of trust. I said evenly, triggering immediate legal enforcement, financial penalties, and permanent exclusion from access. The room went quiet, not tense, not chaotic, just still. Craig blinked. Once, twice, then he let out a short laugh. Okay, come on, he said. You're not actually serious right now. I am. You're going to enforce a legal clause against family. He pressed. Yes. That's when his expression changed. The confidence didn't disappear, but it cracked. Just enough to let something else through. Uncertainty, you're overreacting, he said. Voice tightening. No one's even stayed here yet. There's no damage, no loss. You listed it, I said. You marketed it. You accepted bookings. Each sentence landed heavier than the last. That's not nothing. He opened his mouth to argue, closed it, tried again. This is how assets work, he said, shifting strategies. You don't just let something like this sit unused. That's a waste. This isn't an asset. It literally is. It isn't to you. That stopped him. For you, I continued. It's a revenue stream, a calculation, something to optimize. I leaned forward slightly. For me, it's a boundary. Silence again. This time, it held behind Craig. I noticed movement, my sister, standing near the doorway, arms wrapped tightly around herself. She had been listening. How long? I wasn't sure, but long enough, Craig. She said quietly. He didn't look back, didn't respond, because now he was focused on me, trying to find a way out, trying to find something in the documents he could twist, reinterpret, minimize. You can't just cut me out like this, he said finally. I can. It's not fair. It's not yours. That was the moment it landed. Not the legal language. Not the clauses. Not the consequences. Just that one simple fact. It's not yours. Craig's jaw tightened. His fingers tapped once against the table, then stopped. Because there was nothing left to tap into. No loophole. No gray area. No misunderstanding to hide behind. The argument didn't explode. It didn't spiral into shouting or chaos. Because it couldn't. Everything that needed to be said had already been written. And sitting there, in black and white, was the one thing Craig couldn't manipulate. The truth. But what I didn't realize yet was that this wasn't the first time he had thought about doing something like this. And it definitely wasn't an accident. I found that out a few minutes later. I wasn't looking for proof. That's the thing. By the time the documents hit the table, I already had enough. More than enough, actually. The listing alone would have held up. His own words on the doc would have sealed it. But people like Craig, they don't stop at one mistake. They leave trails. The conversation in the kitchen had gone quiet, not resolved, just stalled. Craig had run out of arguments that sounded reasonable. And my sister had stopped trying to soften things. She just stood there, watching the space between us like it might open up and swallow the whole situation. I stood first. Not abruptly. Not dramatically. Just done. I'm going to check something, I said. No one asked what. They didn't need to. I walked past them, deeper into the cottage. Each step felt heavier now, not because I wasn't sure, But because something had shifted, the house didn't feel untouched anymore. It felt handled, used in a way it was never meant to be. The kitchen drawers were the first place I checked, not because I expected anything, but because it was convenient, accessible. And Craig wasn't the type to think beyond convenience. The first drawer empty, second cutlery, exactly as I left it. Third, that's where I found it. A cheap spiral notebook, blue cover, slightly bent at the edges. The kind you grab without thinking because it's there, not because it matters. Except this one did. I picked it up slowly, felt the weight of it. Not heavy but not empty either. Behind me, I heard movement. Craig. Raleigh, he said, voice tight, you don't need to go through my things. I flipped it open. And that was the third mistake. Numbers. Pages of them. Not random. Structured. Organized. Calculated. Weekly projections. Seasonal pricing adjustments. Cleaning costs minimized to the lowest possible number, unrealistically low. Occupancy targets. Even notes about peak demand windows. I turned another page. Then another. Each one worse than the last, not because of what was written, but because of how prepared it all was. This wasn't something he threw together in 2 days. This was something he understood. Something he had done before. And then I saw it. Not a number. Not a projection. Just a sentence. Written smaller than the rest. Tucked into the margin like it didn't matter. Like it wasn't the most honest thing on the page. Riley won't notice. Parents won't understand. Easy. I stopped turning pages. Didn't need to anymore. Because everything else, every number, every plan, every calculation suddenly became background noise to that one line. Behind me, Craig exhaled sharply. Okay, he said quickly, stepping closer. That's not what it looks like. I turned the notebook toward him. Not aggressively. Not accusingly. Just clearly. Then tell me what it looks like, I said. He didn't answer. Not right away. Because there are moments where explanation requires creativity, and moments where it requires lying. This was both. And even Craig needed a second to figure out which direction to take. It's just notes, he said finally. Ideas, rough thinking. You're reading into it. Am I? Yes, he insisted. Too fast. It's not a plan. It's not. You wrote easy. Silence. My sister stepped forward. Craig. She whispered. Still, he didn't look at her. Because now he couldn't. Now the audience had changed. This wasn't just me anymore. You wrote Riley won't notice. I continued, voice steady. Which means you knew I should notice. That's not what I meant. And parents won't understand. I added. Which means you knew they shouldn't be involved in this at all. His jaw tightened. Not defensive anymore. Cornered. You're twisting it, he said. I'm reading it. Another silence. He looked at the notebook. Then at me. Then away. Because there was nowhere else for his eyes to go. And in that moment, I saw it. Not guilt. Not regret. Just frustration. Because he hadn't been caught doing something wrong. He had been caught too early. That was the real problem. Not the act. The timing. I closed the notebook gently. Set it back on the counter. Right where I found it. This wasn't an accident, I said. Not loudly. Not emotionally. Just fact. No, Craig muttered. It slipped out before he could stop it. Small. Barely audible. But enough. My sister inhaled sharply. Craig, what does that mean? He didn't answer. Didn't even try. Because now the truth wasn't hidden in margins anymore. It was standing in the room. I picked up my bag. The documents were still on the table behind us. Still aligned. Still untouched. Still final. You planned this, I said, looking at him one last time. Not asking. Not accusing. Just stating. Craig didn't deny it. Not this time. And that was all I needed. Because intent changes everything. It turns a mistake into a decision. A moment into a pattern. A situation into something much harder to ignore. I walked past him toward the door. Not to leave. Not yet. But because the next part didn't require discussion. It required action. And within the next 90 seconds, everything he built was about to fall apart. It didn't take long. That was the part Craig never saw coming. People like him assume consequences are slow, complicated, negotiable. They think there's time to adjust the story, to soften the damage, to find an angle. There wasn't. I stepped outside with my phone already in my hand. No hesitation. No pacing. Just execution. Behind me, I could hear Craig and my sister arguing in low, tense voices, his sharp, defensive, her strained, uncertain. It didn't matter, because this part didn't involve them anymore. Firstcall.com platform compliance. I didn't introduce myself dramatically. Didn't explain the entire situation. I gave them exactly what they needed. Property ID, listing link, proof of ownership, and one sentence. Unauthorized commercial listing under a non-controlling party. Silence on the other end for a second. Typing verification then. Thank you. We're reviewing this now. I ended the call. Didn't wait for confirmation. Didn't need to. Because I knew how these systems worked. Clear violation. Clean documentation. No gray area. I refreshed the listing. Once, still there. Twice, gone, just like that. 3 years of my work had been turned into a rental listing in 2 days and erased in less than 10 seconds. Behind me, the door opened. Craig stepped out. "What are you doing?" he demanded. I didn't look at him. Fixing it, he pulled out his phone, tapping quickly, refreshing whatever version of control he thought he still had. Then I saw it. That flicker again. But this time, it didn't pass. It stayed. "What did you do?" he asked, voice tightening. I turned to him. "Your listing is gone." "That's not possible." "It is." He stared at his screen, refreshed, again and again, like repetition would change the result. It didn't. "This is insane," he snapped. "You can't just take it down like that. I already have a booking." Right on cue. A voice cut through the tension. Hello?" We both turned. There was a man standing at the edge of the porch, suitcase beside him, phone in hand, expression somewhere between confused and irritated. "I'm here for the rental," he said. Perfect timing. Craig straightened immediately, stepping forward like he could still salvage something. "Yes, hi, there's just been a small misunderstanding, but we can." "No," I said, not loudly, but firmly enough to stop him mid-sentence. I stepped toward the man. "You booked this property online?" I asked. "Yeah," he said, holding up his phone. "Paid already. 3 nights." I nodded once. Calm, clear. "You were scanned." Craig exhaled sharply behind me. "Riley, don't." But I didn't stop. "The listing was unauthorized," I continued. "You'll be refunded in full." The man frowned. "By who?" I tilted my head slightly, then looked at Craig. "You'll refund him," I said. Silence. Heavy. Immediate. Craig laughed, but it wasn't real. It was the kind of laugh people use when they're buying time. "Come on," he said. "You're not serious right now." "I am." "You can't just." "You accepted his money." I cut in. "You return it." The man shifted his weight, now fully aware something was wrong. "I just want my money back," he said flatly. Craig ran a hand through his hair, pacing once across the porch. Everything about him had changed now. The confidence, the smooth tone, the control, gone, replaced with something messier. Desperation. "This is getting blown out of proportion," he said, trying again. "We can fix this internally. There's no need to involve." "It's already fixed," I said. I reached past him, entered the code on the keypad. The lock clicked, then reset. New code, new access, immediate. Craig stared at the door, then at me. "You changed it?" he asked. "Yes. You can't just lock me out." "I can." Another silence, this one longer, because now it wasn't about the listing, or the guest, or even the argument. It was about control, and for the first time since this started, Craig didn't have any. The man on the porch cleared his throat. "So refund." Craig closed his eyes briefly, just for a second, then nodded. "Yeah," he muttered. "You'll get it." And just like that, it was over. Not with a fight, not with a dramatic explosion, but with something far more final. Exposure. Because everything he had built in his head, every assumption, every shortcut, every calculated risk, had collapsed under one thing he didn't account for. Proof. I stepped back from the door, letting the silence settle. Craig didn't move, didn't speak, didn't even try to argue anymore, because there was nothing left to argue. And as the man picked up his suitcase and walked away, shaking his head the last piece of Craig's version of the story walked off with him. All that remained was the truth, and one final conversation that needed to happen. The strange thing was, there wasn't a fight. Not after everything. No shouting. No dramatic accusations. No desperate attempts to rewrite what had just happened. Because fights require uncertainty, and there wasn't any left. We went back inside. Craig didn't say anything. Not to me, not to my sister, not even to defend himself. He just walked in slower this time, like the space had changed around him. Like it no longer fit. My parents arrived 20 minutes later. Perfect timing? Or maybe the worst possible timing. It depends on how you look at it. My mom stepped in first, smiling excited, unaware. "This is it," she said softly, looking around like she was afraid to touch anything. My dad followed behind her, slower, more observant. His eyes moved from the walls, to the table, to the tension sitting quietly in the room. He knew immediately. Not what happened, but that something had. "Raleigh?" My mom asked, her smile fading just slightly. "Is everything okay?" I nodded. "Yes," I said. And for the first time since this started, that was actually true. We sat down. All of us. Same table. Same documents still laid out exactly where I had left them. Craig didn't sit. He stood off to the side, like he already understood his place in this version of the story. I didn't rush, didn't dramatize, didn't soften. I explained everything the same way I had structured it from the beginning. Clear, direct, accurate. The cottage, the trust, the restrictions, the listing, the booking, the refund, the notebook, every piece laid out in order. No emotion added. No detail removed. My mom covered her mouth halfway through. Not loudly. Not theatrically. Just quietly overwhelmed. My dad didn't interrupt once. He just listened. Arms crossed. Jaw tight. Processing. When I finished, the room stayed silent for a long time. No one rushed to fill it, because there was nothing left to clarify. My sister spoke first. I didn't know, she said quickly, her voice breaking slightly. I swear I didn't know he was going to do that. I looked at her, and I believed her. That was the hardest part. I know, I said. And I meant it. Craig shifted, finally stepping forward, like he was being pulled into something he couldn't avoid anymore. This is being blown out of proportion, he said, but the confidence was gone now. No one got hurt. It could have worked out. No, I said. Just that. One word. But it landed heavier than anything else. It didn't work out, I continued. Because it wasn't yours to make work. He exhaled sharply, frustration creeping back in, not because he thought he was right, but because he had nothing left to stand on. We're family, he said again, like the words still held weight. I stood up, slowly, not angrily, just finished. No, I said. You were. Because I didn't stop there. I walked to the door, entered the code, then reset it again. In front of everyone. New access, new boundaries, immediate. I've updated the trustee permissions, I added, turning back toward them. Only mom and dad have access now. No exceptions. My dad nodded once, not surprised, not resistant, just accepting. Craig didn't argue, didn't protest, because now he understood something he hadn't before. This wasn't negotiable. My sister looked at me, eyes wet but steady. Is there anything we can do? She asked quietly. I paused, not for effect, but because I actually considered it. Then I shook my head. No, not out of anger, not out of revenge, but because some things, once broken, don't need repair. They need distance. Craig left first. No dramatic exit. No final words. Just gone. My sister stayed a little longer, not to argue, not to defend him, just to sit in the quiet of what was left. Eventually, it was just the three of us, me, my parents, and the house that had almost become something else. A week later, I brought them back, properly this time. No tension, no audience, no interruptions. My mom walked through the front door slowly, like she was afraid the moment would disappear if she moved too fast. My dad went straight to the dock, same place Craig had stood, same steps, same view, but different intention. He didn't measure anything, didn't calculate, didn't analyze. He just stood there, looking out at the water, breathing. This is ours, he asked quietly. I stepped beside him, looked out at the lake, then nodded. Yeah, I said. Then, after a small pause, safe, because that was always the point. Not the money, not the gesture, not even the house itself. Safety. And for the first time since I started building it, it finally was.